All right, everybody, we are back for part two of our celebration episode here, episode 1001. We are excited to be back together talking, but not for the reason we're talking about, because Isaiah Jackson, James Wiseman, as we mentioned in the last episode, both have Achilles injuries, and the Pacers now only have one center on the roster. They do have Enrique Freeman on a two-way contract, but he is a 6'7" power forward. A little bit too difficult to play that guy a handful of minutes. The Pacers have gone small with Obi Toppin and Siakam at the five at times, but I don't think that can be a long-term answer for the Pacers center depth. So Facci and I have come up with at least I know it's 11 names that we've come up with. And so I've got about seven the Pacers could trade for, and Facci's got about four for free agents. So where do you want to start?
I'll start. So do you want me to work my way up from some of the, I'm not gonna say the less sexier names because I'm gonna be honest, this isn't the sexiest list of center free agents out there, but maybe I'll work my way up.
Yeah,
So
let's just talk about the free agent market, right? Because at this point in the NBA, like this point of the season, the market's not as high. You don't have any buyout candidates right now either, usually. So the market's pretty dry, and the Pacers desperately need a center. Now, I will say this: my only concern about getting somebody out of free agency is how ready have they kept their bodies?
a good question.
And that to me is where I'm like, okay, and how much are they going to fit into the Pacer system? Because the Pacers like to run a lot, and will these players be able to fit that system? So there's been some tweets out there, and I know people have kind of had their eyes on some people. So Facci, you had four names that you wanted to look at in free agency. Kick it off. Who do you want to start with?
First, I'm going to hit you with an honorable mention, all right? Because you know there's always going to be an honorable
Of
mention with me,
course.
all right? And that is someone that is near and dear to us, but unfortunately, I just don't think it makes sense anymore. It's Thad Young. Look, Thad is 36 years old. He's played a little bit more center the last few years than the bulk of his career. He was more of a power forward back then. Former Pacer, everyone's got something great to say about Thad Young, but if you remove the nostalgia out of it, unfortunately, I do think that Thad's probably done playing in the NBA. He's not on a team this year. The last few years haven't been anything to write home about. So I just wanted to throw that out there, tip
Yeah.
my hat to him, give him a little bit of respect, but unfortunately, I don't think it makes much sense.
No,
Uh,
just too small in my opinion.
yeah, just too small on the older side. I just don't think it's a good fit. So I'm gonna go with the first name I'm gonna throw out there, and then I'm gonna work my way up so it gets a little bit better than this. I promise everybody. JaVale McGee. So JaVale McGee, a 16-year NBA veteran. He's actually gonna be turning 37 years old soon. So I'm already a little bit scared off in terms of the age, but this is someone who's a three-time NBA champ. He's been with Team USA before, believe in like a FIBA type of situation. But JaVale's always been a good shot blocker, a very capable rebounder, good lob threat. He played in 46 games at Sacramento last year. This is someone that would easily be signing on for a vet minimum. A little bit on the older side, but in terms of what the market is, thoughts on JaVale McGee being tossed out there?
I think he's a little bit too old for me, right? 37's a lot to be asking a guy to play significant minutes. If he was a third string center, I wouldn't maybe have a problem with that, kind of playing the James Johnson role, like if you need him in emergencies, but like not somebody you want to be playing every single night. So I do have reservations, I guess you could say, with the JaVale McGee stuff. Like I know people are like, oh yeah, JaVale McGee was fun. Like, look, JaVale McGee has been in the league for a long time. Like he was
Yeah,
in the league while I was still in high school. Okay. That's crazy to me. So
yeah.
JaVale McGee had a good run, good rotational big in the league that had some moments on different teams. And he does have an incredible wingspan. But Facci, I think I'm out on JaVale McGee. But if that's who they go with, it's better than the options they have right now currently.
No, it definitely is. And, JaVale McGee, look, I'm not going to be pounding the table to say the Pacers need JaVale McGee right now, but, he did have some good moments, but definitely a guy that it's saying he's past his prime is an understatement.
Yeah.
So, do you want to go right now, or do you want me to go
Just
random?
stick on the free agents and then we'll get to the trade guys after.
All right, so I got another guy. He's actually in our backyard right now, and you know what? He's a lot younger. It's Jahlil Okafor. So the former third overall pick from the 2015 draft. I mean, I really had to. I thought initially like, was it 2013, and then I went 2015. Wow, same draft as Miles Turner. Yet he's been out of the league since 2021. 6'10", big man, currently a member of the Mad Ants. He's yet to turn 29, like I mentioned. Okafor for his career averaged 10.4 points per game, about 4.5 rebounds on 54% shooting. Super low risk signing, guy who's definitely hungry to get back in the league. What are your thoughts on Jaleel Okafor?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because when you see the Pacers sign a player that's to like an Exhibit 10 deal or whatever, and they release him the same day, everybody gets kind of like confused by what that means. And so they literally signed him on October 15th and then released him the exact same day. It was just to kind of give him a little bit of a training camp roster bonus. I think he gets a little paycheck from that. They acquired him in a trade, I believe, with the Mad Ants. And so they have his rights. He's on the Mad Ants right now. He's been practicing with them. As you can see in this picture on YouTube that I posted, he's in a Mad Ants practice jersey. So I will say this could be probably the most likely signing, in my opinion, only
I think,
because he's already in their building.
yeah,
It's they've got an eye on him. They have an idea of how big he is, what he could provide, and obviously, like it's an opportunity they probably didn't want to seek out. But now that that opportunity is here, could he provide good minutes? Like you said, he hasn't been in the league in a couple of years, so probably not the most skilled, I guess you could say, in terms of like talent wise in the NBA because he plays an older school game.
yeah.
And I think had he been drafted in like 2002, he probably would have had a much different career because of how the league was playing. But, this dude had a great game in college, back to the basket kind of guy, and the league was
It was
not,
a rookie year,
yeah.
and it was all just the league kind of changed, and they brought in they already had other bigs in Philly. It just wasn't a good fit, and he's one of those guys that I think like never really evolved with the NBA, and but
Mhm.
I do think it is a likely scenario at some point, but not the best scenario.
Yeah, and you can probably bring him in on a pretty cheap contract, non-guaranteed contract as well, if you kind of want to just at least let him try it out before you decide, okay, this isn't working. Now we'll actually go try to find a trade. Maybe that makes sense because teams might not be as willing to make a trade for a center at this point in the season since we're only into like week 2. So I could see where teams might be a little bit more hesitant to make a trade right now. We just don't usually see that. But, I think Okafor could make a lot of sense just because the Pacers already have that relationship established with him being on the Madian. So I would say this is the most likely of any free agent signing, in my opinion, to happen.
Yeah, and due to that fact, it is exactly why I had to have him on the list because it's very easy to forget that the guy's even still playing basketball. But when he's, right under your nose, I think it's definitely something that needs to be brought up. So next on my list, this guy is just a trusty veteran. He seems to be out of the league just about every year and then makes his way back to the league. It's 13-year veteran, true pro, Bismack Biyombo. If you haven't heard that name in a while, major throwback is Biyombo killed the Pacers when he was with the Raptors in the playoffs. At this point, about 10 years ago. I mean, it's been quite some time, maybe actually even a little bit more. But anyway, Biombo is someone who always finds his way back into the league. He's 32 years old, so he's right in between JaVale McGee and, Jaleel Okafor. He's only 6'8", but he's always been like a solid rotational big where, even last year, for his career, 5 points, 6 boards, about a block per game. Even last year, played 30 games in his run with Memphis. 5 points, 6 boards, 1 block. It's just what he does. He did it on 56% shooting. So when you're talking about a guy that you're like, is he still keeping his body fresh or anything compared to like a Okafor who's been out of the league for a while or JaVale McGee who's older? Bismack Biyombo shows that he's able to shake off the rust. But at this point, he is what he is.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bismack Biyombo has been in this position as well before, right? You've
Yeah,
talked about it. It seems
time
like
after
every
time.
year there's a team that calls him to kind of come in and play hero for their backup center spot, and he usually produces at least in the first month or so, right? He
Yep.
brings you some energy because he's a tenacious rebounder. He'll go and try to block shots, even as he gets older, right? Like he's just a tough minded dude. So I have no problem with that. I think that he is a very, he's a veteran presence that would be welcomed, I think.
Serviceable.
Yeah. So very serviceable big is a great word. So if they brought in Biombo, I would actually not be upset about it. I think, that makes sense. I think Biombo, I don't know how much he fits the system,
Yeah.
but was he on the Toronto team with Pascal?
No, 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 no.
No, he was already gone by the point.
I
I know he's kind
believe
of been a journeyman, so
I believe he was gone by then, but to be honest, he's been signed so many times that I want to say he might have actually made his way back to Toronto. So I got it pulled up right over here
I
while I
don't think
buy
so.
myself some time. So no, he never made his way back to Toronto. but he was on that team that we ran into in the playoffs. And I just remember that man was a menace on the boards. And that was the 2015-2016 season. So I'm not going to say he's still bringing that type of tenacity, but I just feel like it's going to be hard to find someone who A is available and B fits our style very well. So sometimes, you might have to make an exception on a guy like Bismack Biyombo, which I'm going to be honest, I would be excited. Not the same excitement I had when we signed James Wiseman, but if we signed Biyombo, I would be like, okay, you know what? This is someone that we could throw out there that is just he's not going to mess anything up. And for that, I can't say the same about a guy like JaVale McGee at this point where the wheels just may fall off.
All right, Facci, you have one more free agent. Let's
One
get to
more
that
for you.
guy.
All right. The last one I got on my list. He's got a good nickname. We all love nicknames. Goes by Frank the Tank. That's Frank Kaminsky. 7 foot big, 31 years old, so a little bit younger than Biombo. Always gonna be remembered for his time at Wisconsin in college, going to the national championship. But he did have 3 different times where he averaged double figures in the league. Unlike Wiseman or Ijax, Kaminsky can be a 3-point threat for his career. He's a 35% 3-point shooter. So when you're talking about someone that I'm not going to say it has a similar game to Turner at all, but I'm saying for the fact from a big that could stretch the defense, he can shoot the three. Played sparingly in the 2022-2023 season before last year playing in Serbia, so he is still consistently playing basketball. And just last month was signed and waived by the Suns, so was nearly on a roster, but it didn't work out, and he is available.
Yeah, I think I brought Kaminsky up like the moment Wiseman went down, and I said they got the roster spot. Would that make sense? I think it does stylistically, probably the most because of his ability to shoot the three. But how good a shape is he? Is he in the shape the Pacers want him to be in? That would be my only concern.
It's tough to find those guys the way that we run. They're not just growing on trees, but I do think that Kaminsky is someone that clearly the Suns saw something enough to sign him, not enough to keep him. But at this point, I think Frank Kaminsky out of the list, there's a reason why I saved him for last. He might make the most sense.
All right, Facci, let's get into guys that I have come up with for trade stuff. And now I will just preface this. I'm going to try to go through this a little bit quicker so we're not diving into each player super long. But since I got a lot of names, I just want to throw it out there. I think that the Pacers are in the spot right now where they do have about $2.6 million to play with under the cap. So that's why they didn't sign Cole Swider to that contract or they waived Kendall Brown because they have that extra money now. And to me, I think the Pacers are going to look for somebody on the cheaper end of things because I've seen a lot of people throw out what about Valanciunas or Robert Williams, and it makes sense because these teams do have a lot of centers, but if you want to acquire somebody that's making $10 to $12 million, you have to get rid of somebody, and not just anybody, somebody decent to fit into your cap because the way the new CBA works and everything like that, the amount of money you can absorb back has to be a lot closer than what you're sending, to what you're sending out than how it used to be in the league where you could, the percentages were different. So I just think that needs to be set here early on. So I'm looking at guys that make close to that 2 point, around the minimum contract that James Wiseman's making. So I want to preface that by saying that. So when you hear these names, you're not like, oh, these guys suck. It's just, you're looking for a backup big. And I think the reason why I like the idea of trading for one better is because they've been through the training camp. They're on the current roster. They've got their bodies in shape. And I think that does help. And I'm starting with a guy that I think would make a ton of sense for the Pacers. It's Bruno Fernando from the Toronto Raptors. He makes around $2 million a year, but under the Pacers salary without having to trade a player in return. You could offer Toronto, 1 or 2 seconds for him. Got a very similar build to Ijax. He's 6'9", Facci, athletic. Wow, I can't say that. Athletic as all get out. Good grief. Tongue tied right there. Maybe I'll have to edit that, but I probably won't. Athletic as all get out. And I just like the way that he plays above the rim. He's been a journeyman throughout his NBA career already. And he's on Toronto currently right now, not playing in their rotation. And Kelly Olynyk is out as well. So once Olynyk comes back, he's going to be buried on their bench even more. If Toronto could get a few more seconds, it would not surprise me. And the Pacers have 3 second-round picks in this year's draft. They don't need those draft picks. And they've already made a trade with Toronto. So I think that it could make a lot of sense. He was on Atlanta last year. I don't know if he was traded in the offseason or if he signed with Toronto in the offseason. I can't remember, but he's played in 4 games this year, 9.5 minutes a game, not a ton, but I just think that this is a guy that is going to come in right away and contribute and be that energizer, kind of like Isaiah Jackson off the bench. Not as big, but I think that he could provide some good minutes.
No, I think he could. I remember when Bruno was coming into the draft after his freshman year at Maryland, and I didn't think he was ready. Fell just the top of the second round. I felt like never really got like a true shot in the NBA, which happens to so many guys after just 1 year in college. I do think that he's someone that is young enough where there could still be some of that untapped potential compared to some of the guys that I mentioned, where you know that their prime was 10 years ago. I think for Bruno, if the Pacers can acquire him for 1 second round pick, that would be awesome. Once you start to look at 2 second rounds, it's like, oh man, that's a great deal for Toronto.
Yeah.
But I do think that Indiana is in a spot where they need players that can actually be willing to play 15 minutes a night or anything of that sort. And I think that Bruno is someone that probably could give the Pacers 15 minutes a night. I'd be
Yeah,
in.
absolutely. I'm going to move on quickly now to another guy that's on the Charlotte Hornets. And this was a guy that I think the Knicks were rumored to maybe trade for, and that is Nick Richards. So Nick Richards is 7 foot tall, 245 pounds, and Facci, I think he's hurt right now, if I'm not mistaken. So he's still coming back from an injury, but I mean, he's 7 foot tall, he's 245 pounds, and you can't teach that, right? So little WWE reference there for you. But similar to Bruno Fernando, he's 26 years old, so still, right there at that young mark that kind of matches the Pacers' age, and I think that he could be a nice piece, backup big off the bench. He's proven that at times he's started in his career quite a bit. Good, more of a defensive-minded guy. So the only problem with him, he's making $5 million a year. So that is where it gets tricky. If you wanted to make this deal happen, you're probably going to have to include James Wiseman in the deal to get this deal done for it to just slide underneath. And I think you might even have to waive James Johnson because he's on a partial guarantee. So you waive James Johnson, and then you bring James Johnson back, probably like they've done several of times when they've made trades like that. So that is something I could see happening, but I just think that for Nick Richards, it's probably less likely to happen just because I think Charlotte values him. He's making $5 million a year, and it'd be more difficult to get him.
I think it's too good to be true. He got a contract extension. I think it was before last year. It was like 3 years, 15 million. And I was like, yeah, they value Nick Richards like that, and he's delivered. Right now, early on the season, 11 points per game, 10 rebounds. Like this would be the home run. When you're talking about if they had to be James Wiseman at this point, to be honest, I might be interested in if it had to be James Wiseman, at least 2 second round picks at minimum. I might even be interested in giving them all three. And I know that that sounds a little bit crazy just to say, but it's 3 second round picks. You're not going to be using these. Nick Richards is a player that has delivered actually the last few years. Last year, averaged about 10 points and 8 rebounds. If the Pacers were somehow able to pull this off, this is the best case scenario, arguably.
Yeah, I mean, he's a really talented player. So the Pacers could get him somehow. That would be interesting, but I don't think it's realistic. I just wanted to throw him out there because I do like him. I think he's dealing with a shoulder injury. So he exited Friday's game against Boston with that. He had just come back. So that'd be a good name to go out and potentially get if you can. Maybe that's more of a trade deadline deal versus right now. A guy that I think can honestly be had right now in a deal for 1 second round pick is a guy who looks old enough to be my dad at 32 years old. That's Cody Zeller. Okay. Cody Zeller, Indiana legend, right? Played at IU with Victor Oladipo, came to Indiana and really changed that program around under Tom Crean. Has had some moments throughout his time. He was with Charlotte for a little bit. He was with the Pelicans last year. The Pelicans traded him to Atlanta in the DeJounte Murray trade. He is currently on the Hawks roster, but not with the team. Okay. He's making about a $2 million contract around that veteran minimum. So they could easily just obtain him in their salary with a second round pick. I don't know if he necessarily fits the style of play, but he is a smart basketball player that I think could provide some minutes. And it's just nice to have another guy with size that has experience. So I think this is where Cody Zeller to me could make some sense.
I don't hate it at all. I really don't. Like, is he on the downside of his career? Absolutely. But I think that given how slim pickings it is out there, and the ties to Indiana, I think is like kind of the tiebreaker to be like, hey, you know what? That's a good feel good situation. It's depth. It's not like anyone's asking him to be the starting center. But given that how slim that market is, it's not the worst situation, and you're not really trading anything, to be honest. Like this could even be like the most heavily protected worst second round pick. I think he could very well be had.
Absolutely. The next guy that I'm going to bring up is a Canadian, Facci, and I know that the Pacers love their Canadian basketball players. He also played for Rick Carlisle with the Dallas Mavericks for a long time. It's Dwight Powell. Dwight Powell is 33 years old, Facci. He is older. He is only playing about a minute and a half per game this season. So 2.5 minutes per game this season. He is 33 years old. Now, do I want him playing a ton of minutes for the Pacers? Probably not. I know there's been a lot of ups and downs with him in Dallas in terms of what people think about him, what people don't think about him. But if you look at his career, right? 2 years ago, or excuse me, last year, he started in 9 games. 2 years ago, 64 games, 3 years, 71 games. So he has experience as a starter in the league. And no, he's not a great player that's going to put up a lot of points, but not a great rebounder either if you look at his numbers statistically. Just 2.8 rebounds for his career with Dallas as more of a power forward. But if the Pacers are looking for somebody that has a little familiarity with Rick Carlisle, I think that Dwight Powell could make some sense. He's not the name that I'm most intrigued by because he is 33 years old, but if that is somebody they brought in, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
So it's actually 2.8 rebounds on the defensive side, 4.4 for his
Oh,
career.
excuse me.
So it's actually a little
You're
bit better.
right.
7 points, 4.4 rebounds per game, 60% from the field. Like, to be honest, I was actually like, whoa, wait, he's just completely out of the rotation for Dallas. That was someone that was a big part of their rotation for years. If
Yeah.
the Pacers can acquire Dwight Powell for, truly not much at all, a second round pick or so, and whatever else. I mean, from a salary standpoint, I'm not entirely sure what he's at. I would probably imagine he might
Think
be
he's
in.
$4 million a year right now. So they could easily trade James Wiseman for him and it would fit perfectly into the contract, or they could trade James Johnson for him if they wanted to make that kind of move. But I would assume they would rather keep Johnson because he's
I
healthy and
agree.
trade Wiseman, who's on that minimum contract.
I agree with that. So he does actually have a player option for next year. It's not the worst thing at $4 million, but for right now, I definitely think that would be a really good opportunity for Indiana to be able to get a guy that just fell out of the rotation compared to a guy who's clinging to keeping his job in the league.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at Dallas, they got a lot of centers, right? They got Daniel Gafford last year in the trade. They drafted Derek Lively, so they've got players that can really fit that center position, and they have Maxi Kleba, so they don't need him to play, and that's kind of the thing where he is nice insurance, right? Like the Pacers wish they had maybe some insurance here, but I think that makes some sense. One more guy I'm going to talk about. Actually, I think I have three more guys on my list, so I will make this quick. Bol is the other name from Phoenix, right? 7'3" center. He's 25 years old. He can shoot the ball. As skinny as a rail, right? Only 220 pounds listed, but I think he's probably skinnier than that. He's had some moments. Like last year, he shot 42% from three, Facci. So it's like, could he be somebody that could be a nice backup big for the Pacers? Maybe. I just don't know what Phoenix is thinking with him, right? They did re-sign him in the offseason for about a couple $1 million. So it's not like it's a massive contract where you'd have to pay a bunch to get him. So I don't know if they're looking for something, and I think they're a team that needs more assets, right? Because they've traded everything. You give them 2 bad seconds for Bol. We'll give you a pick per bowl, right? So, uh,
That's great.
bad joke there, but
That's great.
I just wonder, like, could somebody like that make some sense?
I would absolutely be in. I have always loved the idea of Bol, just like everybody has. I thought it was crazy when he slid all the way to the second round, but to be honest, he's never proved himself. He had moments in Orlando. The talent is definitely there. He's just never been consistent enough. He's too like wiry, like needs to put on some muscle that he never will. But I would absolutely be intrigued. And if it takes 2 second round picks, think about this. It's not just 2 second round picks. It's 2 second round picks to a Phoenix team that has no picks. All
Right.
right. So that could actually be really intriguing to them. And I would absolutely do this deal if I'm Indiana.
I think it'd be really intriguing. I worry about his health. That's my only concern. As you're trying to get healthy with this roster and your bigs, like that's my only question mark. The next team I'm going to is the Utah Jazz, and everybody has been in my mentions. Walker Kessler, Walker Kessler, Walker Kessler. Okay, that is a name that has been floated out there in trade rumors, and he is making around, I think, $4 million, something like
Yeah.
that. So they could make the deal happen, but they're going to have to give up a future first at least to
Oh, yeah.
get Walker
Minimum.
Kessler. And so, do you want to trade a 2028 first round pick with probably like little protections on it and completely stunt all of your potential trades that you have because you can only trade, like a 20, 30 in swaps at this point if another deal becomes available for a guy that will be your backup. Unless you believe he's going to become your center of the future, that just seems like a lot. They do have some other bigs down there that don't make much. Kyle Filipowski, somebody they drafted last year in the second round. They also have Drew Eubanks. I don't really think that those two guys are moving the needle for me. I know Filipowski had a decent game the other night from what I saw. Like the Jazz are 0-6. Like they're not trying to win any games right now. And I don't think that having Walker Kessler in their rotation is hurting that as they're trying to develop him. And he was a big piece, if not the biggest piece, really, outside of, picks in that Utah Jazz Minnesota trade. So while I would love Walker Kessler, and I think that would be your best buy, buy big, backup center that you could get out of everybody we've listed. I just know that dealing with Danny Ainge is not easy,
Worst.
and it's going to cost you a lot, and probably you're going to have to overpay to get him, especially since he knows you're handcuffed here, needing a center desperately.
Oh, Danny Ainge would be milking us like a cow. He'd be squeezing that last, drop from an orange from us. When I saw Walker Kessler on the list when we were going through this, I laughed. I went, oh, man, this isn't going to happen. Because Danny Ainge knows that there's a lot of interest around the league, and he's going to ride this out until the trade deadline, and he probably will deal Walker Kessler. I do think there is a scenario where Walker Kessler could be good enough to be Indiana's center moving forward, in a world without Turner. But it would absolutely cost, I think, more than a first round pick. Like I really do think that Ainge would be pushing for, if it's not, two firsts, it's a first and someone really
Probably
promising on
Furphy.
Furphy. Yeah, like Furphy seems like the exact type of young player they would love. Like a first, Furphy. Are they really trying to push for like a Ben Shepherd too? Is that too much? Like, I
Probably a
don't know.
couple seconds.
But I completely agree. First, Furphy, second round picks, like this deal would cost a good amount for an Indiana team that would then be like 100% all in terms of like, whoa, they owe picks to other teams now. It's just like it's pretty steep. I just don't think it gets done.
Yeah, I don't either. So I'll quickly move off that one, and I will give you my last one here.
Yeah.
This is a guy that I actually was talking to you about off air a little bit yesterday because I remember like this guy killed the Pacers in the game that Pascal Siakam debuted in, and that's against the Portland Trailblazers. And you might be thinking, well, who did they have at the center position? Was it DeAndre Ayton? Would you want to trade back for him? Since we didn't get him when we signed him, with Phoenix offering, Robert Williams is supposed to make his return from not playing for a year, and then they got Donovan Clingan. Like, who else do they have? There's a guy by the name of Duop Reith. And I remember Reith was like, who is this guy? Who is Reith? Where did he come from? He was a plus 19 against the Pacers and Pascal Siakam's debut. He is a second year player, Facci, who was a rookie last year at the age of 27. He's had a lot of experience playing in the European leagues. He also went to college at LSU. He's 6'11". He's 245 pounds, and he can shoot the three ball at a very nice clip. He took about 4 attempts last year and shot 36%. So not a bad little clip there for him. He only played about 18 minutes a game, but he did start in 20 games last year for the Portland Trailblazers. And I know that they were not good. He played in 68 of those games. But if you watch his film, I think that people would be really intrigued by him as a player. So Duop Reith can really shoot the ball well. And he has a much more confident shot. And he's very calm when he drives to the basket and can finish above the rim. Basically, how I described it to some people is he reminds me of a less clunky Jalen Smith without as high of a potential. So if you're trading for that guy who's only making about $2.1 million on a Portland Trailblazers team that's not good, and they have 3 centers on their roster, this might be somebody that you could kind of poke and steal from Portland and say, look, we have an opportunity here. We don't need to give you anything besides a couple of second round picks. I think they would gladly take that. You could even potentially give them all 3 if you need to, but I'm just saying, like, this is a type of player that I think would really fit the Pacer system because he can spread the floor. I think that'd be a nice fit with that second unit, as well as kind of fill the gaps there in the lane. So I know his name's not popular, and people are gonna be like, "Who is Duop Reith, and how do you even spell Reith?" It's DUOP Duop Reith REATH. If you go watch some of his YouTube clips from last year with the Blazers, there's like an 8-minute mix where you can kind of just see like what his game is. And I think you'd be like, okay, I would actually like somebody like this on the Pacers. So for me, out of all the names that I mentioned, probably the ones that make the most to me are Bruno Fernando and Duop Breathe. Those are the two that make the most sense to me, and they're the most affordable and gettable as they're about $2.1 million for their contracts.
So I watched the highlights. You sent it over, and I was impressed. I really was. I'd seen the name and box scores, but I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't as familiar with his game until I watched those highlights. His 3-point shot looks good. It really does. His size is really good. This is a legitimate 7-footer. A couple of the guys that I'm sorry, 6'9", but he looks bigger than his size.
Is he 6'9" or 6'11"? I think he's 6'11".
So it's interesting. ESPN has him at 6'9". I'm telling you, those highlights, he looked.
Basketball Reference has him at 6'11". I don't trust ESPN's
Yeah, I mean,
measurements.
and for the record, I want you guys, when you're listening to this, ESPN still lists Isaiah Jackson as a small forward. I've had a problem with that for years. That has really rubbed me wrong. So anyway, 6'11", that makes a lot more sense because I was looking at him like this guy has size. Out of all the names that you mentioned, I think that he is the most obtainable because this is a Portland team that isn't going anywhere. And you talked about the amount of like actual centers that not only deserve playing time but need playing time based off of what they're getting paid. So I really do feel that it wouldn't take the 3 second round picks. I feel like it could be one. Could it be two? Two has to get it done. But I just don't think this is an overpay type of situation. But I also kind of feel like this could be a little bit of a sounds like a stretch, but a little bit of a diamond in the rough type of situation. Like you talked about it, a 27-year-old rookie last year. The guy averaged as a rookie 9.1 points per game, about 4 boards. Shot the ball really well. I felt like you don't see that a lot. He had been playing around the world in all different areas, and I feel like he's able to now kind of like contribute when called upon. And I think for the Pacers, he would have a big opportunity. And out of all the names that we mentioned, give me someone like him over a guy that's been out of the league for the last few years or anything of that. And I don't want to overpay and then be further all in on this team. A second round pick, in my opinion, I think could get it done.
Yeah, I really think it could because they already have so much center depth. Like,
Exactly.
what else do they need at this point? Like, he's not getting playing time with this team.
Who
Like,
else is calling for him either? I don't think anyone
yeah,
calls at this point for him.
yeah. I mean, literally this year he's playing 3.5 minutes a game.
Yeah.
Okay, and those are probably all in blowouts because they've been bad this year. I mean, it's Portland, so he's 28 too. Like he's not young. So he fits the timeline of this team right in terms of like not being the oldest guy, but I think he could come in there and make some major sense. So he probably is my favorite of all the names that I
Oh,
listed and why I put him at the end of my list. So I did text a few friends about him, just because I'm like, I think Reith could be a really nice person. They're like, who is this guy? I'm like, let me just show you some clips, man.
right on.
I'm telling you, like, it's just don't be so like turned off because you don't know who the person is. You're like, who is Do I Breathe? This guy is a joke, whatever. But like, to me, it just makes the most sense. Like, I think Jaleel Okafor or Duop Reith would be my like who I would bet on for the Pacers to go out there and bring in.
Yeah, I think that's fair because I just don't think that Indiana's in a spot where they want to part with an actual player that they value. Like I don't think that Indiana's gonna smash the emergency glass and say, you know what, let's just give up on Johnny Furphy to bring in a backup center right now. Like no, like that's just not a smart move. Also don't think they're in the situation to really, pony up picks and players for Walker Kessler. I think it'll be a low risk type of scenario. Second round picks being offered. Yeah, maybe that James Wiseman type of contract. I also did read that they could get up to $2.2 million for a disabled player. Situation with Isaiah Jackson. I'm not sure what would be involved with James Wiseman's injury. So maybe Indiana is able to recoup some money, and maybe that could influence them making a little bit of a bigger move down the line. But for right now, I think these are the names that are available and are obtainable for the most part. And don't get your hopes up too much. This isn't going to be a player. India's not going to be acquiring any type of, top-notch backup center, starting center type of situation. No, this is, hey, how do we make the most of the situation?
Absolutely. So we wish nothing but the best for both James Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson, especially Ijax, who's entering a contract year, right? Did not get an extension done early with the Pacers either. So
Hurts.
I know if he rehabs well, like, and they like how he played, obviously early on this year, like some of last year, they might be able to get him on a discount of a price, right? You hate to say it like that, but you just hate that he's not going to be available for this season because he was playing great basketball. And now They've got to go out there and address it. So we'll see what happens. They could make a move by Monday. Who knows? Maybe Tuesday. They might just ride it out for a little bit with Obi and Siakam playing some small ball five. But if they get in foul trouble, they're just going to be in trouble. And
I
maybe
worry.
James Johnson has to play some more, which would just be crazy.
I know.
Could see them elevating Enrique Freeman, to just traveling with the team instead of playing with the G League just because of, the circumstances they're in right now. But I just don't think it's a long-term solution. I think they need to find somebody that makes some sense. And that's why the names we mentioned, I think, could make some more sense just for a one-season sample, here for the Pacers versus going out and getting somebody that's going to completely just really mess things up. Like if you wanted to make a massive trade to go get a center, okay, but you're giving up a lot of wing depth, and at this point, you don't want to do that.
You don't. Last point I'm going to say, was it a mistake letting Oscar Tshiebwe not have one of those two-way spots? We would have never known, but it's
I
just
just don't think he ever really fit the Pacers
he
system.
didn't.
I saw people asking, where why can't they sign Sheboy? I'm like, well, he's on a two-way with Utah, so they can't. But
No, we can't. It's just very unfortunate because I always want him to have a little bit of a bigger opportunity, and then this happens and he's not around, and just we have rebounding issues that the man can rebound, but it's just about it. And he would have never, he's not the fastest guy. He's not, there is no offensive game, but it woun't have been the worst case scenario. I'll say that.
let me just ask you this, and we'll close it out with this. Do you just maybe wish that they would have not drafted Isaiah Wong or Mojave King and drafted Trace Jackson Davis?
I mean, think about that. I still, when I think about this, how reluctant they were to just eat the money on Daniel Tice and just buy him out at that moment and just be able to give Trace Jackson Davis a guaranteed roster spot. They end up just thinking that someone was going to be interested in taking on Daniel Tice and calling around. It's they should have right then and there just said, you know what, let's just stretch this contract and just get rid of him. And that would have been a really good situation. So yeah, that one hurts.
Absolutely, Facci. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, I just want to say, hey guys, if there's any names that we missed, drop them in the comments. Look, we're in this together. We want to find the best fit for the Pacers. So if we missed anyone, please let us know.
Yeah, please let us know because it's hard. There's a hard it's a hard job to do to go out there and find the right players to trade for. And I'm sure there's probably some that I missed. I just didn't want to mention every single person that could be potentially on this list. So we gave you 10 names at least, probably more than that, with mentioning 3 Utah Jazz names. So who knows? Probably 11 to 15 names. So with that being said, we'll be back tomorrow. Recap Pacers Mavericks. Hope you guys enjoy part 2 of the episode. We gave you guys quite a bit of content today, so hope you guys enjoy that, and we will talk to y'all later this week.